Welcome to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. I'm Dr. Amy Cooper-Smith, a doctor-prepared nurse practitioner, and this show is about empowering you to live a radiant, healthy, and balanced life. I'm very excited to introduce today's guest, Mike Upstone, the president of Keep Help Research, based in Austria, Europe. And he's also the author of the groundbreaking Frequency Healing book series featured on Amazon. So, welcome and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much indeed for having me, Amy. It's a pleasure.
So tell us about Keep Health Research and what is it that you do?
We do various things. The first thing that we do is public facing, which is that we collate the research that's already available on the frequency healing area, which covers quite a diverse set of modalities. So the frequency healing area goes back to, at least the 1980s, many of these studies. So we aggregate that knowledge together so that people can find out what studies have been done and the kind of results that we can get from these technologies. The second part of the public element is really issuing the books to people, because people are jumping all over this area, but they need to know what's possible. So we show them what's possible in terms of the evidence, the photos, the x-rays, things like that. And I think that's a big surprise to a lot of people in this area. But then we unearth the assumptions and the questions that a lot of people just skip over because they're learning by memes. And then ultimately it ends up in a holistic approach, but also, a frequency healing masterclass. And then at the other side of this, we've got our website where we provide some of the most advanced technologies in the world, literally built in satellite factories, to people. We integrate them with other technologies. And of course, then we provide all of the training and the support so that people can get the results that they want out of that equipment.
Wonderful. So can you explain to people what is frequency healing?
Sure. So, well, everyone knows that the body's got a central nervous system and it runs on electrical energy. And a lot of people realize that that's linked into the chemical endocrine system, and the two are intimately connected. And the endocrine system has much longer sort of delayed effects within the body. And there's a third system discovered by Fritz Albert Popp in the 1980s, which is a photobion, biophoton, sorry, light-based system, where the DNA produces photons and they get transported around the body. But every organ has its own cells and they have their own frequencies. So the human body really acts like a frequency orchestra. It all has to harmonize together. So, and very often when the body's failing at homeostasis, its own self-regulation, then it's lacking in energy or it has inadequate communications. And these gaps can be filled by various forms of frequencies in the form of laser light, for example, or electrical energy or something like that. And they can stimulate very, very powerful healing responses and even regenerative responses, which is where the body returns to its state of self-management as if an injury or an accident or chronic illness, emotional trauma never happened in the first place. So in practical terms, undoing scarring, for example.
Oh, wow. So you mentioned laser light therapy. What other kinds of therapies do you offer?
Um, we work primarily actually with the electrical items. Would you like to see one?
Yes.
Okay, so this is built in. I'll just switch it on
Okay.
because sometimes it can misbehave. But this is built in a satellite factory.
Oh,
This is
it's
called an
tiny, like the size of
ENS.
a cell phone.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what should happen should be it's a bit of a warm day, but maybe we can put it there. Oh yeah, right there we go. It's now
Okay.
connected with the body. My body is instructing this which of four different healing programs it wants and what percentage of each and how much energy. And basically, it will also indicate when it's made a difference to the body, which we would consider to be a dose effectively. So this stimulates, it puts in energy that the body can recognize for healing, but it also stimulates healing responses from the central nervous system. And that's rather like, the old Laurel and Hardy films where Stan Laurel turns round and he's got a plank over his shoulder and it whacks Oliver Hardy over the back of
Oh,
the head. And he has, I think, what we can assume to be, a fairly sort of correct response to that. So he's upset. Maybe it goes a bit far because he then pokes Stan Laurel in the eye, but then he has the response to that and he pokes Oliver Hardy in the eye. So what we're looking for is both speed of responses and quality of responses from the central nervous system. And effectively, that's what this technology provides, but it also deals with cellular energy, intracellular energy, and the responses of the nervous system itself.
So when you use that device, do you have to tell it what's bothering you if you're having a symptom or something like that?
It can be used. No, basically, it's very. It's extremely highly tuned. This is where the biofeedback mechanism
Ooh,
and the tuning of the device in terms of large numbers of frequencies, vast ranges of harmonics, has to be produced in a satellite factory. But ultimately, the easiest possible way to use it is, I've got a pain in my shoulder, put it directly on the pain on the
mm,
shoulder. But we have other ways of dealing with the whole body as an organism itself, where we are measuring and treating down the spine, for example. So the main communication pathway of the body, or the gut to stimulate immune responses, and points on the face to connect to the trigeminal nerve in terms of stimulating parasympathetic healing responses as well.
So you mentioned a few things that it could be used for. So pain, a lot of
Yeah.
people can, I think, relate to that. And I think in our areas, I think we are seeing some of these devices used for pain.
Mm.
So how does it work to alleviate like a musculoskeletal pain?
Well, as a byproduct of very rapid healing, basically.
Ah,
Can I show you a couple of pictures?
yes.
Would you like to see that? So this is from sort of the third book, effectively. This is like the masterclass in what the top technology will do. But so we've got time-stamped images here,
Mhm.
sent by the user of one of these devices, and this is a 91-year-old, I think, with Alzheimer's, a blood blister on the finger, a 10-minute treatment, and then a photograph taken an hour after that treatment. So about an hour 10 all told. And as you can see, there's no sign of the blood blister at all. So this is one of the things that surprises people, the extreme rapidity
Right.
of the best technologies. And this is a lovely example as well. So here's a young girl who's virtually in a catatonic state above. Very typical low energy responses are very milky, cloudy eyes, unfocused. But these, as you see, are rolling in the back of her head. And then this is the result of one 12-minute treatment with a specific brain training technology called alpha learning. And as you see, the child's back, and this is a permanent effect. It's with most people, with lucky people like you and I, we'd be getting around about a 10% IQ increase. And this has been proven by various different organizations around the world, in the US and elsewhere, on a permanent basis. But with someone like that with a very severe TBI, they might be looking at a 30 plus percent increase in IQ as a result of stimulation through the correct frequencies of neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, and ultimately also helping the two hemispheres of the brain to rebalance and communicate effectively as well.
So the child in the photo, did she have a brain injury? Is that what
From
was
birth.
causing that state?
From birth. Yeah,
From
that's right.
birth? Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Okay.
Yeah.
So I can see using, of course, for brain injury, using something like this, but you just kind of gave me an idea that I could increase my IQ, and then I'd be unstoppable if I used it for that.
I reckon so. And in fact, this is where there's a sort of bigger vista, if you like, outside healing, because Olympic gold medalists are using technologies like these to improve their performance, their timing, their balance, their tolerance of stress, and ability to refocus themselves if they have a bad shot, for example. So it's got broad sports applications, though the I've been going deep into the sports research recently and finding out that one of the issues is that almost all the sports studies are predicated on standardized treatments, which is not really appropriate for such a huge variable as human biology, which is proven from other areas, but also business performance, creativity. Harvard professors were involved with research there, and really many broad aspects of human existence and performance, actually.
That's amazing. You've mentioned research a couple of times, and you've compiled a vast amount of research. How do you measure these effects?
That's a very good question. So the researchers obviously have their biological markers for testing things. So there tends to be a big emphasis in EEGs and QEEGs from the brain training sector. Um, Other kinds of technologies are predicated upon a measurement approach. This would include bioresonance diagnostics, and the best rooted research and development actually goes back to the Russian space medicine program from the 1980s, which was around about, in today's terms, a $5 billion investment with over 1,000 of their top doctors, biophysicists, and engineers for a decade. So there's some great research there, but it's difficult to access for us in the West on the whole. And of course, then in terms of treating people in a normal sort of home situation, because these are devices that people can use as home users as well. They're very safe and very easy to use generally. Then they're going to be following a path where they're treating the body as a whole system. They're dealing with main complaints and particular symptoms at the time, but they're also going to be measuring and treating down the spinal process, for example, or the gut and things like that. So that's going to be an issue of going back through the symptoms. And then, of course, in other issues, I fell over and smashed my ribs a few years ago and punctured a lung, 5 double breaks on my ribs. I did a real good job. And of course, in that case, then you've got the X-rays and things like that. So at the 5 week stage, when I'd been treating myself with these technologies, I ended up with no callus around the ribs, despite the fact that I was about 60 at that time. Instead, the bones were just a nice, smooth, sort of gentle, lazy curve. And the doctor looked at that and expressed his surprise and said, this is an old injury, because that's exactly when you expect to see, the height of the callus really at that particular stage.
So you mentioned an earlier treatment that was 10 minutes, 12 minutes. I would imagine for an injury more severe, it would take longer. Was that your experience?
Yeah, it depends actually. So, one of the strange inversions with energy healing is that when we treat people with chronic illnesses, they are typically having very, very short dosing times because the body has a lack of capacity to process the energy or the information. So, it's got to start off from a very small basis and build its capacity to deal with it until it starts to get into extended treatments. But this is where it's very, very important to understand this principle of the variability of the biology and the fact that everybody's body's different, everybody's body's different every day. So we either need to have specific techniques for dealing with devices that don't have this biological feedback mechanism built in, or we're using those kind of devices where we can rely on that to define a minimum and ideally a maximum dose. Otherwise, we're into the biphasic switch response and potentially A, undoing the issues, and B, even if we miss it, because I specialize in very, very fast acting technologies, then running into oxidative stress. So
Yeah.
when I was treating my, baby daughter for teething, for example, it was 10 seconds with the laser that I use. And unless you're really attuned to looking at some quite subtle signs, it could be quite easy to blast through that and heap damage upon, an already problematic situation for the child.
Yeah, so maybe a warning for people considering these therapies, if it does not have the biofeedback that you mentioned, to really be cautious because we too much could cause harm.
Yeah, and really, this is where, I'm a great believer in the fact that people should get. I would always buy a proprietary device where there should be high quality training and support with that as well.
Hmm.
Because if we're looking at technique, we need to be able to apply it, rigorously to a high standard and not cause harm no matter what we do. But a lot of people are jumping in with frequency generators and things like that, and there's no regard for that biphasic switch response. And a lot of those are relatively low powered, so they can be quite forgiving. But if people don't know about that and they don't know about this shorter dosage time for chronic illnesses, it could be quite easy just assume your way through that and say, well, I haven't had a fantastic response, I'll just keep going, and actually you're causing problems in that situation. So I think I prefer proprietary devices, and I would also always say, check out the training and make sure they've got excellent support, because if you're in a medical emergency situation, you want that support there and then.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to have you hold that thought. We're going to pause for a break from our sponsor. You're listening to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. I'm Dr. Amy Cooper Smith, and my guest today is Mike Upstone. Before the break, we were talking about frequency technology, healing, the ways it can be used for the body. And you gave us a warning that not all devices are the same, and that some of them are so powerful that if we overdose, we can actually cause harm to the body. So you really stress the importance of education and support from the makers of the device that you choose to use.
Very much so, because people are tending to, that a lot of people are picking up on what they call Rife lists. Well, Rife never published his lists. He worked in resonances. So think about tuning forks and vibration rather than just hertz. And he directed his treatment with a microscope. So, Rife didn't publish lists. So people are just copying lists around the internet and then using frequency generators, and they don't work the same as natural harmonics anyway, because they lack the overtones and the subharmonics as well. Nature has a much broader bandwidth than a digital device. So yeah, this is where I favor the proprietary devices with, good training and good support.
Yeah. So you wrote a couple books, 3 books about these things, and the first one was for beginners. So would you recommend that's a good place for people curious to start to learn more about this?
Yes, I think so. It's a short, they're all easy books to understand, because I think if you can't explain things in simple terms, then, you probably don't understand them very well. But I do try and dig the science in there and the studies as well, and cover it in a straightforward manner. Um, but if you really want to see the effects, because I think it is an eye opener for people. We do have doctors as our trainees, and clinicians and people like that, some very experienced clinicians. Then have a look at the main book, which is Frequency Healing, Energy Healing, Regeneration and Holistic Health, because Amazon have put quite a decent read sample section on there, so you can get a feel for that. And that's really the masterclass. But the book in the middle is about the holistic strategy, which is, we have to be frank about this. These frequency technologies, even the best in the world, don't work all the time. We're working at the border of what is a functional and what's really a non-functional situation that can't be redeemed. So in that sort of gap, we have to play this strategic game of Clue, I think it's called in the US, or we call it Cluedo, where we have to line up the main suspects and tick them off the list in terms of things like pH, diet, detoxes, deficiencies, and things like that. So that really wraps in this holistic strategy to enhance the results. And in fact, that can have a, quite a profound result all on its own, because we're dealing with, good science here, autophagy, the stimulation of the proteins for the body's self-cleaning mechanisms, etc. So that's what the books cover.
Okay.
So 3 books: a beginner's guide, which is really just the easy step off into the area. What are all these different devices? What are the categories? What do they mean? And then how do I choose the best thing for my individual circumstances? Because we've all got very different needs. The second book covers the holistic strategy, because this is based on the fact that even with some of the world's best energy healing technology, it'll only work 85 to 95% of the cases. So we need ways of identifying blockages, deficiencies, detoxes, other things that may be necessary to support that strategy. Because if the root is a deficiency, for example, then it may be that a frequency approach does not bridge that gap. So we have to be able to deal with that intelligently, and fill in the gaps on the board effectively. And then the last one really is the one that the beginner's guide was based on, which goes much more deeply into the devices and how to use them and things like that. So that's, it should be a pretty decent stepping off point for anyone who's interested in this area.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that we're having a discussion about frequencies and energies, and we have a storm going on outside of our studio. And if you see our lights flickering, I think it'll make for a neat YouTube video, just really demonstrating the power of energy.
Yeah, and the power of Mother Nature, because this vehicle that we're sitting in is just unbelievably powerful and complicated. So, but we're getting more insights into this all the time, and it's a very inspiring area and empowering area, I think, not just for doctors, but for anyone who's interested in health or human performance.
Yeah. So you started with the beginner's book. So let's say I I am, an aging person, and I'm very interested in healthy aging and doing what I can to stay ahead of the curve. So where would you suggest I start?
Probably the holistic strategy book,
Mm,
because I think it's predicated on a lot of home remedies, information with science behind them, the natural characteristics of things like zinc and quercetin and cofactors and things like that. So that's very powerful. And I know a lot of people in America are way ahead of the rest of the world in terms of supplements and things like that. But then we need to make sure we get the right quality,
yes.
because without the right quality and the right cofactors, we're really just making expensive urine, and that's not really very beneficial. So yeah, I think that has some easy stuff for definitely improving the what we might call the internal environment of the body, and helping to support its natural processes.
Yeah, we've talked a bit on the show about supplements and the really important fact that not all supplements are what we think they are. And at best, we're making expensive urine, but some of them actually contain contaminants. And, if they're not high quality, then again, we're doing harm when we think we're
Yeah.
trying to help ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many of them are very misleadingly labeled and actually come from, not just the chemical industry, but the petrochemical industry.
Mm,
So, these are not natural substances that our body is really meant to be taking in chemically in terms of a formula. They may look the same, but they're not derived from biological sources, and they have a different energetic imprint as well as chemical performance, I believe.
absolutely. So in your book, I did we you and I just kind of connected yesterday, but I did get to check out your book, and you have a really large section on nutrition and supplements and all these things that can holistically be used along with the frequency healing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, we don't know in a given situation when the frequency devices might not work because there's just some deficiency and it's
Hmm.
impacting, an enzyme production chain or something like that. So yeah, I think it's an intelligent way to treat something that is so incredibly sophisticated that we're really, in many ways just beginning to skim the surface of how it really operates.
Yeah, if you have someone who's using the therapy, the frequency therapy, and it's just they're not getting results, would you encourage them to have lab testing or further workup?
Yeah, absolutely. We cover this in the book, actually. So,
Oh,
there's lab testing, but there's very little lab testing that I've found that is truly comprehensive. Because as Dr. Wallach found through his research in the 1980s, I think it was, something like 90 different nutrients that the body actually requires. So obviously, most of that is predicated on the major macronutrients, not so much as the micronutrients, but even they can be very, very important in certain situations. Another approach that's quite new and innovative in this area is to direct that approach through bioresonance diagnostics, where frequencies are sent into the body to detect viruses, parasites, bacteria, fungi, and then, like an opera singer singing a note, shattering them and then playing frequencies in to support the waste disposal systems of the body, but also looking at cellular energy, but also being used now quite innovatively in terms of identifying deficiency factors, potentially toxic overloads and things like that as well. So that's quite an interesting new approach that's being used to, for that particular problem.
So, by residence diagnostics, is that
Mm.
something that people can get access to, or how do we use that?
Yeah, in fact, there are all sorts of, apps, even free apps for this kind of thing nowadays, though I'm not really in favor of them. And part of the reason is that, I can deal with some people who've really got some quite nasty, difficult, complicated situations, and sometimes life-threatening. So I favour, the top end devices, which are derived from the Russian space program. They're listed in the books, and there's only about a dozen of them. And everyone else really is playing catch up with that kind of research. And I don't really like the idea of using a mobile phone for diagnostics either, because that's operating on the basis of a whole load of unnatural frequencies. And if we read our phone instructions carefully, we'll find that they're saying don't keep it in your pocket, keep it a certain distance away from the body, and especially when it's charging, because then it can, really boost the those, potentially biologically disruptive frequencies as well. So we're dealing with some quite delicate, cellular biology also with this stuff. So the other thing is that the scans shouldn't vary with these devices. So I'm not that happy in recommending the lower end devices. And I certainly, if someone had a chronic situation, I'd say get yourself to a proper practitioner who's got this kind of equipment and knows how to use it. Ideally, they've got a range of other things as well. So they have like a broad vista over the area and how that works. And then they should be able to do a good job for you in that situation.
Well, you've given us a lot of really good advice on this emerging technology, and I'm learning more every day about it. Well, I really appreciate our talk today.
Me too. Thank you very much for your great questions. It was very kind of you to have me on your show. I
Uh,
appreciate it.
and so, how can our listeners learn more about you and get in touch?
Well, we've got a website called keephealthresearch.org, which is all one word. And then if you look up Michael Upstone or frequency healing on Amazon, I'd encourage you to have a look at the main book, the frequency healing, energy healing, regeneration, and holistic health, to have a skim through. Some very inspiring examples, I think, from the read sample section. And then, if you just want something low cost to kick off with, try the black and white beginner's guide. But if you do, I'd really appreciate you considering, sharing that with other people and leaving a review and a rating afterwards as well. And my contact details are in all of the books as well.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning in to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. Do you have insights from this show? Send me an email at radiumpodcast2025@gmail.com. Check out past episodes on YouTube, and we're also featured on Apple Podcasts and all your favorite platforms. I'll be back next Saturday morning at 7:30 with more expert insights to help you live a radiant and healthy life. Until then, here's to your best life.